Ultimately, if you use the correct knife for the job, you'll find it easier and it will enhance your presentation. Hi, I'm Taryn. Welcome. I love food, plating and presentation. Sometimes I get asked what knives to buy for the home kitchen. Having the right knives can really make or break your love for cooking. It's so important that you love your knives and they do what you need them to do. Today I'm going to show you the knives I have in my kitchen and how I use them. I'll demonstrate on this variety of ingredients here. Well, these knives aren't going to show themselves to you, so let's get them out. So here's a chef's knife, or a couple of chef's knives. A serrated and a straight bladed paring knife. A bread knife. A filleting knife. A boning knife. A sharpening steel. This doesn't do what you might think it does, but we'll get to that later on. And a sharpening stone. Using the right knife for the job will enhance your presentation, and that's what we're all about on this channel. If you're trying to cut a delicious croissant with a chef's knife, look how it squashes the delicate pastry layers. If you're trying to cut a pumpkin with a paring knife, help! I hope it doesn't break the blade. And if you're trying to use a bread knife to chop herbs, they aren't going to end up very chopped at all. So using the right knife for the job will make your life easier. I don't have anything fancy, but I wouldn't want to be without any of these. Let's go into each of these knives in some more detail. Knife number 1 is a chef's knife. It's well worth investing in a good one of these. This is a 20 centimetre forged steel knife, which basically means it's cut from one piece of carbon steel. You can see how the metal runs all the way through the handle here, making it nice and robust. You can also get one that's a stamped knife, where the blade's only coming a little way into the handle. It's not quite as robust, but it still does a good job. This knife is a great size, especially if you're just learning to chop. They come in varying different lengths, so find one that you find comfortable to use. A chef's knife is used for basic food preparations like slicing and dicing, chopping onions, cutting through big things like pumpkin, shredding leafy vegetables, crushing garlic. It can actually do most things, but having a few different knives that are more suitable for specific things can make it easier to do and give you a better end result. If you haven't already seen it, I'll leave a link in the description below to a video on basic knife skills, which will show you the basics for chopping, slicing and dicing, and how to hold your knife. I use this knife so much, I've actually got a couple of them in my kitchen drawer. Knife number 2 is a paring knife. You can get these either in a serrated blade or a straight blade. I personally prefer the serrated blade because the straight-sided blade needs a lot of sharpening. If I find these pointy-tipped serrated knives in an 8 centimetre size, I stock up because they're so hard to find. They're also so much more useful than the rounded tipped ones. Honestly, if you were trying to cut the core out of a tomato with the round tipped knife, it's not really going to work, is it? Anyway, I have several of these and manage to use all of them most days. They are great for small jobs, like cutting an apple, or for soft-skinned tomatoes, cutting florets of broccoli and cauliflower. I personally cringe when I see someone cutting straight through these beautiful florets with a chef's knife. Doing it this way, you keep the heads nice and round, like little trees. It's also essential for peeling smaller fruits like oranges and kiwi fruits. If you try to do this with a big chef's knife, you'll end up cutting away half your fruit. I like to say, use a small knife for a small job. You have more control and you'll end up with a better final result. Knife number 3, a bread knife. This is such a useful knife. I have 2 of these as well. It's so frustrating trying to cut bread without a decent bread knife. You end up cutting very uneven slices and it tears the bread. A good bread knife will easily slice through crusty loaves of bread, stacks of sandwiches, and delicate baked goods. This knife is also great for peeling fruit like melons and pineapples. A chef's knife will work too, but if I have the option of both, the bread knife will definitely be my first choice. It's also great for splitting cakes in half, and will double as a carving knife if you don't have one of those. One thing about this knife is you can't sharpen it on a stone very easily. But I've had this one for 15 years, it's had a lot of use and it's still going strong. Knife number 4 is a filleting knife. It's got a nice flexible blade which is just what you need for filleting fish. If you don't have any intention on cutting the skin off a fish fillet or filleting a whole fish, this knife isn't necessary. But if it's something you do, this knife is essential. It's most often used on its side in a sweeping motion. It's perfect for getting in between the skin and the fish fillet effortlessly. If you're equipped with the right tools, you'll very soon be filleting like a professional. It's so satisfying sliding this knife under the fish skin and cleanly pulling off the fillet with minimal wastage. Knife number 5 is a boning knife. It's similar to a filleting knife in that if you don't intend on doing any deboning at home, it's probably not necessary. But if you're keen on a little bit of butchery at home, this knife will really help with the process. I'll leave a link in the description below to a video on deboning a lamb leg, which shows this knife in action. It has a shorter curved blade with a pointy tip designed for getting in nice and close to the bones without damaging the surrounding meat. It's also great for smaller butchering jobs, like taking the bone out of a chicken thigh, or cutting in between the bones of a lamb rack, or pork ribs. So that's my knives, and over here I have 2 vital accessories. This is a sharpening steel, also known as a honing steel. It doesn't really sharpen a knife at all. When you're using a knife on a very small scale, it's pushing the edge of the blade outwards, making it feel blunt. So by using a honing steel, you're recentering the blade, straightening it after it's been used. The knife might seem sharper after honing, but this is because the blade is in the proper position. Honing should be done frequently, either before or after each use, or even several times in between. Here's a sharpening stone. This is used to sharpen a knife, where little bits of the knife blade are actually shaved off, creating a new sharp edge. Using a stone doesn't need to be done too often, maybe only a couple of times a year, depending on how much use a knife gets. I'm interested if you're thinking about buying new knives sometime. Just remember, it's one of those things, you get what you pay for. Cheap knives are cheap because they're made from a cheap metal and won't stay sharp no matter how much you sharpen them. In saying that, even with new quality knives, the blade can become dull after the first few weeks of use, forcing you to apply more pressure when making cuts. This increased pressure is a hazard for your fingers as the blade can slip. So bear this in mind when you buy your new knives. Either give them a sharpen on a sharpening stone or take them somewhere to get them professionally sharpened. Then all you need to do is keep up with the regular honing and you'll love what your kitchen companions are able to help you achieve. Knowing how to use your knives will also improve your presentation. So check out my video on basic knife skills, which will set you off down the right path. Happy knifing!